Hello guys, what is happening? So are gas prices heading to the moon? Well, the answer to that question is more complicated than it may seem on the surface level, because even though OPEC has announced that it's cutting, there is much more to that than meets the eye, and we're going to go through that right now. We're also going to go through what they could possibly be saying by doing this to the Biden administration after he was recently visiting the Saudis and trying to get them to up their production. So basically, OPEC cuts oil production by 2 million barrels a day despite US pressure. OPEC Plus has agreed to its deepest cuts to oil production since the pandemic, curbing supply in an already tight market despite pressure from the United States and others to pump more. So the interesting thing about this is they were already behind on production. Now, I've been doing a lot of research into this, and they were already behind on production about 3.5 million barrels from their target. So essentially, the fact that they're cutting production targets 2 million barrels, even though the weekend it was going to be 1 million barrels and now it's 2 million barrels, there's still 1.5 million barrels that they need to increase to even get to their targets that they've just cut to get down to, if that makes any sense. So there's more at play than meets the eye, but the interesting thing is gas prices could be heading up regardless, and that isn't due to what OPEC has done. That is due to what the Biden administration has done. And, let's get over to the chart of the SPR. So I'm going to bring up, and it was hard to actually get a chart for this. It was hard to find one online, but basically, this is a chart of the SPR, and it goes all the way back to 1985. This is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that is meant to be used in emergencies, but has really just been politicized, and it's been politicized in the past before, so this isn't a new thing. But essentially, you can see the drawdown on this is absolutely huge, and it's happened over the course of most of 2021, well, the end of 2021 and 2022, and basically that isn't good, because essentially what you are doing is distorting the oil market. And that's exactly what's happened. And the interesting thing is that a Saudi minister actually came out, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, and said and blasted NYMEX and the CME group, saying that the paper price of crude oil was being manipulated. And I would agree with them, but it's not so much that it's being manipulated by market participants. It's being manipulated by the Biden administration, because when you look at the inventory levels, inventory numbers that have come in for oil, a lot of the time, a big chunk of it is what has been released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So essentially, the US has been bringing everybody's crude oil prices down across the globe. And I think that's why there's not really a massive reaction in the crude oil market to this news of what OPEC Plus is doing. Because when you look at the crude oil market, which I'll bring up right now, I'll bring up a chart of crude oil, and then we'll go through gasoline futures as well. You can clearly see that it's not making that much of a difference. So if I bring up the oil chart there, so let's bring up this, and let's flick over to the oil chart. You can see the oil, it hasn't really had that much of a dramatic increase since the announcement of this. You can see it's ticked up slightly since they started announcing this, but it's really not dramatic. You would be expecting like a 5%, 6%, 7% increase, even 9%, 10% increase if this was going to have a dramatic effect. But what will have an effect is that the midterms are coming up. They need to start refilling this stockpile of the SPR. And guess what? That is going to mean to the inventory levels coming down, and that is going to mean to crude oil prices going back up again, and the same with gasoline futures. Now, the slight cross current to all this is what happens with China. So I'm just bringing up the gasoline futures. You can see it's a very similar thing. We're still at 265 a gallon right now, and it got all the way up to 428 a gallon. But what you guys have probably seen, and I've seen this too, is prices have absolutely exploded across the US and Canada. And I'm not sure if this is going on in Europe as well. Please leave a comment if it is. But prices have gone up due to apparent refineries being took offline and all different things. I haven't managed to find an actual thing that points to one specific thing, but more of a number of refinery issues and refineries being took offline that are pointing towards the price increases that we've seen. But they've been absolutely massive. Like last month here in Alberta, the price went from about $1.25 a litre, which it got to in the low of September, to like 165, 170 I saw it's at yesterday. So that is a huge increase, and that is gonna have an impact on inflation. People have got to understand that that will have an impact on inflation. And I think because of a lot of the rise came towards the end of the month in September, the markets could have a shock. Now, I'm not saying that next week's inflation print is going to be higher than expected. We don't know that. It's all speculation at this point. All I'm saying that typically the analysts have already done what they think the inflation is going to be at by towards the end of the month. So if prices are spiking significantly of a certain thing, then that might not be took into account in their consensus estimates of what inflation is going to come out at next week. So inflation could be a lot higher than the markets are pricing in and are expecting because of how high gas prices have actually gone. So yeah, we can see on this chart clearly there's been movement in the lead up to this since they were talking about it at the weekend. 1 million barrels, and now it's at 2 million barrels. And basically, it's interesting. The mainstream media is saying that Russia was the one that was asking for the 1 million barrel cut in production. But there's really no evidence. We don't have any evidence of that. So that's all just speculation and could possibly be propaganda coming from the media. We really don't know at this point. So it's very, very interesting. Are they just putting the middle finger up at the US, the Saudis, because they are sick and tired of the Biden administration manipulating the price of oil by using the SPR as a political tool? Because essentially it's so obvious that after the midterms they're going to stop using this, and this has really just been to bring down the price of oil in the interim period before the midterms, so it looks better for them. So it looks like the Inflation Reduction Act is actually working. So it's very, very interesting. Another two things that I want to hit on are essentially, you've obviously got a couple of other things that affect the price of oil. One, obviously, you can say manipulation, but it's heavy speculation, really, to say that. I was listening to a podcast ages ago. I think it was about 8 months ago. Chris Irons and some guy was on there. I forget his name. And he was talking about how Bank of America was in up to their eyeballs shorting silver on behalf of the US government because they don't want silver prices, gold prices, obviously, to go up because that is not good for the US dollar. And essentially, they could be doing the same thing, obviously, with oil and getting people to short it. But that's heavy speculation. I don't really want to dive into that. But I tell you what, one thing that definitely does affect it is when you see a massive sell-off in the stock market. When you see a massive sell-off in the stock market, oil sells off, the mainstream media says that is because of recession fears. I don't think it's so much of that. It's just more of a fact that people are getting margin calls. They're trying to sell whatever they can that's liquid. And generally that's commodities because they're the most liquid things. They're global markets. So gold, silver, and oil typically fall when that happens. So it's quite interesting in that respect. But you know what the Saudi minister said about NYMEX and the CME group was very, very interesting, because that was 3-4 weeks ago, and then you fast forward to now and they're doubling the production cuts that they said this past weekend, and it's really more of a gesturing, I think, at the United States, saying, screw you, we don't care. And this is the thing that you see if you read Dalio's book towards when a superpower is coming down. You see this sort of dynamic shift where countries move away from the superpower that is going down and move towards the one that's rising. And obviously, this isn't going to be a shift that takes place over a short period of time. It's going to take a long period of time. But, what has happened with Biden training the SPR is essentially, at the time we're at right now, is kind of a national security threat when you really think of what the SPR is meant to be used for. It's meant to be used for in times of war. And it's not the first time this year that we've seen the politicizing of these emergency measures. We saw it in February. Everybody's forgot about how Justin Trudeau used the Emergencies Act and politicized the Emergencies Act to get rid of a protest that was doing no damage at all and may have been annoying and making people angry who lived in that certain area. But the fact really is that it was a protest and they were well within their right to protest at the government's doors, which is in Ottawa. And obviously you accept that as part of the parcel of living there. Most people work for the government anyway because the government's so big. So that's really it. There's nothing more to add to that situation. I hope you got some insight from this, and I will be back with a video on Sunday. So I will see you then. Take care of yourselves, guys, and have a great week.